She is a fantastic communications professional, and her educational background includes a bachelor's degree in engineering from Covenant University, and she's an alumna of the Harvard Business School Global Business Online Program. She's currently advancing her academic pursuits through a master's degree in international affairs and diplomacy at Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria. She is a 2024 Mandela Washington Fellowship alumni, marking her as one of Africa's promising young leaders. Please put your hands together for her as she joins me on the stage. She's our moderator for tonight. Sit over there, please. Thank you. Next up is Sophia Imite Uka. She's a sustainable energy expert. She holds a master's degree in sustainable environmental management from the University of Greenwich, United Kingdom. Sophia has extensive experience in the energy sector, focusing on enhancing energy access, clean cooking, and renewable energy solutions. She has led projects that bridge the gap in energy access across critical sectors, including agriculture, clean cooking, healthcare, and transportation, just like our topic says. Her work spans policy advocacy, project implementation, and partnership development, aimed at driving equitable and sustainable energy solutions in Nigeria. Please put your hands together for Sophia Imite Uka as she joins me on the stage. You're welcome. Next up, we have Safia Ahmed. She is an agribusiness strategist, extension specialist with over a decade of experience building a portfolio career that encapsulates business strategy, business development, agro consulting, sales and marketing, team management, leadership development, food processing, and agribusiness venture creation. She's an alumnus of the prestigious Rome Business School, where she bagged a master's degree in agribusiness management with a mini executive MBA in leadership and management from Accra Business School, Ghana, in addition to her bachelor's degree in agriculture, economics, and extension. She is also a certified National Business Development Service provider after undergoing the compulsory training by Smedan and Kaduna Business School. Safia is involved in innovative agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa with keen interests in projects that drive food security and nutrition, livelihoods of smallholder farmers, sustainable and inclusive climate-smart agriculture. Please put your hands together for Safia Ahmed. Please sit. You're welcome. And last but not the least, Engineer Olayiwola Ajilore. He is the Service Director at GE International Operations, Nigeria, leading the gas power services business to drive growth, profitability, and top-tier service. He is accountable for the profitability and revenue growth of the business. With a strong background in the power sector, he manages a team focused on enhancing customer operations and efficiency and driving portfolio growth. Olayiwola has played a key role in GE's expansion across Africa and the Middle East, starting his career as a mechanical field engineer and advancing through leadership positions, including contract performance manager. He holds a first-class degree in mechanical engineering from Obafemi Awolowo University, an executive MBA from Lagos Business School, and is a registered engineer with Koren and NSC. Passionate about innovation, mentorship, and education, he also chairs the board of trustees of the Lai Ajilore Foundation, an NGO promoting educational values among young Nigerians. Please put your hands together for Engineer Ajilore. Okay, so over to our moderator, Lady Irene.
Technical crew. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me loud and clear? Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here this evening. This is the 100th Power Dialogue by next year. I think they do deserve a very big round of applause. If nothing else, for consistency. As human beings, sometimes you should understand what it means to be so consistent. For 8 years, this is the 100th month. Thank you so much for all you do and for your contributions to the energy sector in Nigeria. All right, thank you to my panelists for also joining me this very warm evening. We have Sophia on the panel, we have Safia on the panel, and we have Ola. But so that I don't mix the names during the course of the conversation, Safia's English name is Beauty. So please permit me to call her Beauty for the duration of this conversation. Is that okay? Thank you. Preferred. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So let's delve right into it. Today's conversation is something that really affects everybody, right? Enhancing energy access in critical sectors in the economy, agriculture, healthcare, clean cooking, transportation. If we had to go around the room asking questions about how a lack of this has impacted us, each person in this room would definitely have a story. For clean cooking, I do have an auntie that lost her daughter because she was using firewood. For transportation, we know of the issue of different issues that's bedeviling us in the country today, right? You were paying 100 and something naira, and now you are paying about 1,000 plus, but we are still living, right? So these things impact us, and they are very relatable. It's not out of the blues. And so I'd like to hear from each of us, just briefly, 2 minutes typically, what your outlook on the conversation for today is, given that we'll be talking about these very critical sectors: agriculture, transportation, healthcare, and clean cooking. I'll start with you, Ola, being the only man on our panel.
Thank you very much, Irene, and good evening to you all. I hope you've had a good day and a great week. Like Irene said, this topic is very, very important and vital to not just us as individuals, but also to every nation. And when we look at energy, we have to look at energy from the perspective of the energy consumption pattern. For a developing country like Nigeria, the bulk of our electricity is consumed for residential purposes. And for any nation that wants to develop, that is not the right mix. Because when you look at data from other climates, China has only about 20% of the electricity production consumed in the residential sector. The rest, the bulk of the rest, are consumed in industrial and commercial sector. And the same data holds for, South America, the US, and a large part of Europe. So in a country as ours, where we have a need for development, we need to pay a strong attention to this topic. And that's why when I saw this topic, it was very interesting to me, because the sectors that have been highlighted, agriculture, healthcare, transportation, and clean cooking, they are all very important. Reading from the last GDP report, which the president was very excited about, we observed that the non-oil sector is contributing a lot to the Nigerian GDP. So imagine if we are able to industrialize our agricultural sector. Just imagine how much of an improvement we can get in terms of the contribution of that sector to the GDP. And when we talk about health, some of the reasons why some of our doctors emigrate on the Japa syndrome, most times, they say the working environment is not very conducive, because when you talk about healthcare, you need energy, you need electricity, from the basic thing as lighting up the hospital, cooling and ventilating the hospital, to more critical things as, running the equipment. I saw a news recently of a hospital in Port Harcourt that had to discharge day-old babies because the incubator could not be run. They were disconnected and they had issues with their generator about that time. So these are issues that, rear their heads when we don't pay attention to the critical things. So instead of us just utilizing our electricity for sleeping at home, watching TV, I think as a nation, as a people, we should take serious consideration of diverting our consumption to what will lead us to more productivity and prosperity as a nation.
Thank you, Ola, for that. And I like that you really hammered on the fact that here in Nigeria, most of the energy consumption is in our homes.
Yes.
But in other climes, it's the other way around.
Indeed.
And also bringing it back home to the fact that you gave an example about a hospital, how day-old babies that are supposed to be using incubators are, left to go back home. These are real-life scenarios. Sometimes when we are back at home, we feel, oh, as far as everybody in our house, they are complete. We are 5 in the house. Everybody's 5 here. We are good. Mm-hmm. There are other people out there who the access to this electricity may not be as close to them as it is for us. Yeah. So I'd like to hear from you, Sophia, what your take is on this as a background for the conversation tonight.
Thank you very much. And thank you once again to the organizers of this very, very impactful event. Electricity, access to energy, access to electricity is very critical. It affects every one of us. If you think it's not affecting you now, probably in years to come it's going to affect you. You think you have your own source of power generation, you have your generator. But then, like he said, you go to the hospital one day and then the doctor is not able to attend to you. Or the doctor gives you an expired vaccination because he's not able to refrigerate that vaccines. And that's when you get to know the importance of access to electricity and access to good and clean energy for everyone. So this is a very critical discussion. Just recently, we've seen how the increase in fuel has caused a lot of businesses to crumble and close down. It has affected business. We've seen people being laid out of jobs because of businesses cannot run any longer. We've seen increase in production. People are complaining here and there. And that's because we did not tackle this on time. If we had diversified our energy sources, if we had diversified our energy mix on time, we would not get to this point. And so that is why this discussion is critical, and implementation and action is required at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll come to you, Beauty, as well to get your thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak this evening. I think energy is a very critical issue, so much more that is even affecting our livelihood as a people. I think Mr. Ola has said so much. He even talked about agriculture. So I would like to focus a little on that aspect. So from statistics, over 50% of our farming population are smallholder farmers. And these smallholder farmers, they don't even have access to energy because they are all living in the rural communities. And yes, if we say over 50% of our farming populations are smallholder farmers, then that means they are the ones feeding the nation. That's the fact. Yeah. So, and energy is what drives industrialization. So we keep talking about diversification to agriculture, but the main core of the point of diversifying to agriculture is industrialization part of agriculture. And if you don't industrialize agriculture, how are you able to harness all the potential in the value chain? Because that's where value addition is. You are able to tap into all the potential. You have a crop, which is a raw material, and you are able to convert it into so many other byproducts. But at the end of the day, a lot is happening down there, and we keep saying the farmers are living in poverty cycle, but how much access do they have to energy? In fact, just production. There's this new conversation that since we eat every day, we should also farm throughout the year. It shouldn't be seasonal. Right. We shouldn't do wet season, dry season. Why can't we farm all through the year? That's fine. We never really wanted to accept it. We keep talking around the issue. But in the recent happening, it's becoming very imperative, whether we want it or not, because climate change has come to bear. So even the wet season, we can't even back on rainfall. That because obviously, if many people didn't understand the consequences of climate change impact, this year's season has shown everyone where during the rainy season, the rain stopped falling throughout the months of June, July, August, and we had dry spell, and lots of farm produce were lost. And right now, I can tell you that food insecurity is going to be high next year. That's the projection. So energy plays a lot in this. We are talking about let's improve irrigation. It's still energy. If you are going to use biofuels to start your irrigation machines, it adds to cost of production. Okay, the rural farmer cannot afford that. It's just very few of them that can do. We haven't even satisfied that aspect of irrigation farming. And now it's becoming very imperative that even the wet season, there has to be provision for irrigation. So I think it's a takeaway for us to go and look at it, that it's not just because we have to alternate energy, but now it's now a core issue. We just have to do it for survival. That's the fact. So this is the aspect of production. What about the livelihood of the farmers that are there? I've been in the community where I worked, in Ibadan local government. There's no light. They don't have water. They don't have road.
Beauty, I'll need you to hold your thoughts there.
Yeah.
So that since we're talking about agriculture and industrialization and the infrastructure needed for us to industrialize, I was in Michigan some months ago, and what agriculture has provided that state alone with in agribusiness and agri-production is over $104 billion. Now that is a state, just one state, right? And I'd like to come to you, Ola. Speaking about this conversation we have here, which is, agriculture, I know that most of your professional bit has been from converting gas to power, right? And so with many developing regions facing unreliable grid power, how do you see the role of gas to power evolving as a base load complement? And I repeat, base load complement, because again, we're also trying to build our solar solutions and the rest. However, there are some of the equipments that are needed for agri-processing, for example, that requires really heavy energy sources, right? And that's where gas to power also comes in. But I'd like to get your thoughts on how we can really leverage on gas to power evolving as a base load complement to renewable energy solution in agricultural processing, particularly for energy-intensive activities. Some examples, cold storage facilities, irrigation systems and the likes.
Thank you very much, Irene. And it's been interesting. And hearing from Beauty, more perspectives on agriculture. I have to say that, gas to power is here to stay for a very long time. Yes, there is the buzz about renewable energy. That is the energy transition from conventional energy generation to renewable energy. But it has been identified that gas will still play a key role, in that transition. So gas has been dubbed as a transition fuel, from going from the heavy carbon to zero carbon. And for agriculture, especially the processing, so because many people see agriculture as just, tilling the land, cultivating, but where value is really added, to a point is the post-farming, which is processing. And that's where you have a need for high energy intensity because the equipment at that level, for cooling, for irrigation. So for bringing it back home, for Nigeria, one challenge that we've observed is that the farms are not economically viable for you to invest in, heavy energy generation specific to the farm. The example you made about Michigan and the likes is because at that level, farming is already industrialized. So you have hectares of land, daily production, daily processing of the farm produce. So how do we specific to our own situation, our own context, how do we then marry the two? I see it in two phases, and that is one, the pre-installation of the renewable energy sources, because eventually for the farms, what will be very viable for them will be the renewable energy sources. But at the instance, there is a high capex to start a renewable energy that will be sufficient for this agricultural processing. So there is a need for us to have, at a government level, at a policy level, prioritize supply of energy, supply of power to these farms. So if we are able to clusterize the farms, have a dedicated, maybe in terms of the distribution terminology, have a dedicated feeder, that supplies power to these locations. Then the second phase will be, so this helps the farmers to generate capital, because when they are able to process this farm produce, they are able to get more value. Right. And by getting more value, there is increase in their revenue. And then from that point, they can then start to mix the energy. So gas to power energy will still play a key role at that second phase. But at that time, it will then be a complement to the renewable when the renewable sources are low, because renewable can be seasonal. And in Nigeria, wind is not that, the wind speed is not sufficient to have continuous power, so we still rely on solar. But we still have periods of the year where the sun is not as intense. So at that time, you still need the gas to complement. But it all starts from the policy and prioritization. If we want to treat all the sectors the same way, say, okay, I want to charge the residential, healthcare, agricultural sector the same way, band A, band B, band C, without any prioritization, then we will remain where we are. So for us to be able to really drive value from agricultural sector using the energy and the electricity generated from gas to power, there has to be a special treatment, for these farm locations, because you don't get the farms in Wuse or Gwagwalada, where they can easily connect to utility power. So there needs to be a serious intervention, for this sector in order to be able to drive it to that industrial level, because we have arable lands, and we have human resources, a lot of unemployed people, that if agriculture is made attractive today, they will prefer to live, on the countryside than in the urban area.
I loved your closing statement about really who would prefer living in the countryside than the urban area.
Well, I would.
I will. Typically, I will. And thank you for raising the point about economic viability, and also advocating sort of that we begin with solar solutions first and then scale up and then the backup using gas to power when particularly the intensity of the sunlight needed may not be so strong. I would come to you, Beauty. Before we came on stage, we were talking about agricultural estates, and you made mention of the point that as critical as this is for the farmers out there, right, their energy needs differ. Correct. And we can't use a generic solution. I would like you to speak on that, and then also talk about the fact that from an agribusiness perspective, because you run a formidable agricultural business, which energy-enabled agricultural innovations like solar irrigation have shown the strongest impact on farmer profitability and market access. Still linking to what Ola was talking about, the viability. What key operational changes were needed to successfully integrate these technologies?
Okay, thank you. I think when we're discussing, I told you that there's no generic solution. Why? Because in Nigeria, let me take for instance maize. I think you can grow maize almost every part of Nigeria. You can also do cassava, almost about maybe 21 states in Nigeria as well. But there are crops that actually, they have different climatic needs, geographical needs, and also the clusters that actually focus on it are few, right? So I would rather say if we are going to address the issue, let's first of all do a study. Let's even understand the clusters, the concentrations of our crops and the growing zones of them. Then you now go back and say, okay, what are their individual energy needs? Because of course, the farmer who is into rice farming and the person who is doing vegetable, the irrigation need differs. Their EOP are different. So it's not the same amount of money you spend to provide irrigation for tomato that you are going to use for rice or even for wheat, right? So why don't we just address it individually? You study the growing zones, the clusters, and you're able to say, okay, for cotton, this is their energy need. For cotton, that's cotton production. This is the energy need for cotton production. This is the energy need for cotton processing. This is the energy need for preservation, storage, right? And you now come to rice. Then if you're able to identify all this, you can now provide sustainable solutions, not just solutions. So, but if you sit down somewhere and you say, okay, because there are systems, I want to use them, and you create a generic solution, at the end of the day, you provide solar or alternative or whatever, and believe me, the person who is in rice process can't even use it fresh the paddy. So at the end of the day, it's not even sustainable. That solution is dead on arrival. So right now, it's about sustainable development. Whatever it is you think you want to push in that fund that we think is so scarce, and we are going here and where to gather for the populace. At the end of the day, you make the wrong decisions, and it's not sustainable. And yes, everybody you keep willing, the government is doing nothing. Why? Because the decision making is very poor. So I would rather say, let's do case studies, right? Let's do under study. It's a roundtable discussion between energy experts and agric experts. They'll put in data, and you now go to the field, you look at it, what we have on paper, is it what is it in reality? I will tell you that at the end of the day, there will definitely be changes of what you have on paper and what is on ground. And then you're able to merge what you gather on the field and what you think you have at hand. And it helps you make better decisions and provide sustainable solutions, right? So there are private sectors that have provided irrigation, solar irrigation, cold storage. So cold storage basically is for people that are into vegetables, right? So, and at the end of the day, it's not even all of them that can afford it, because solar is, has high capex, like he said, it's capital intensive. So if we are still today in Nigeria, we are battling the issue of supporting farmers with palliatives to farm an hectare of land, which of course, let me just give generic instance for maize. Currently, you spend like maybe 350 to 500,000 naira for just 1 hectare of maize. Okay, so now, is it solar irrigation or solar irrigation that they can now afford? So I would rather say in this aspect, if you are going to do it and it's going to be sustainable, why not we do PPP? There are a lot of private organizations there that have this solution, but they can't even survive because it's not being adopted because of the high cost that is attached to it. Farmware is there, GIZ is doing, but at the same time, you might not even see the impact because they are just few in different axes. Right.
Typically, so you're saying that there's a major need for energy needs assessment across the entire value chain, which would then feed into the policy conversation that Ola was talking about earlier. And I'd like to come to you, Sophie, at this point. Drawing from successful deployments you've seen, what are the critical success factors in designing sustainable energy systems that can reliably power things like irrigation, post-harvest processing in rural agricultural communities? And how do these differ across seasons and crop types? This really just ties into what Ola and Beauty have been, buttressing on since we started the conversation.
Okay, thank you very much, Irene. Just as Mr. Ola and Beauty has said, there has to be an energy needs assessment. different crops require different energy. Different activities, different farming activities also require different energy requirements. And so you have to do a needs assessment. You have to know what is required at every phase. And then there's a financial aspect to it. And that's where it all boils down to the finances. How do we finance this technology? How do we finance these solutions? We have the solutions out there, but the missing link is the financing. How do we finance it? There are various financial models that has been adopted by international organizations, donor organizations, and various institutions. We can use like the pay-as-you-go model, which is upcoming in the rural areas where these farmers can pay as they use, And so the burden of huge financial commitment is not on them. We can also, the government can also come in, provide guarantees, for these organizations, grants, concessional loans. These are financial instruments that can be put in place. And then there's a policy aspect to it. The government has a role to play in creating an enabling environment. Enabling environment requires the right policy frameworks to be put in place, because before any investor wants to come into any city or any country, the first thing they ask, what is the policy regarding this thing? What is the government saying regarding this thing? Because if you don't ask that question, you find out that you come into the country and there are roadblocks, and then you cannot implement your project. So the government has to create an enabling environment to encourage investors, encourage most likely private investors to invest their funds, because they are after return of investment, they're after profitability. And with these frameworks in place, it encourages them. And then also you look at community engagement, sensitization, awareness. Some of these rural farmers are not even aware. A lot of them are not educated. They are not aware. Some of them are not even on the internet to know about new and viable solutions we have out there. So there has to be sensitization, awareness campaigns, bringing live demonstrations to these farmers, showing them that these things work, and then giving them good financial incentives to go ahead with these solutions. So with all of this in place, we can see a gradual, if not a momentum leap. We can see a gradual leap in the adoption of renewable energy in agriculture, healthcare. It applies to almost every sector. It's really interconnected. The farmer sometimes relies on medical practitioners to be in good health, be able to carry out his job. And then also, when you farm, you still have to transport your products, to city or to wherever to sell them. So it's all really intertwined. So we need to really, really address the issue of energy access, both in rural and urban communities.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for all of those points, leveraging financial instruments.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, again, if you want to put in money into a business, you want to be sure that it's going to come back to you at least in multiple folds.
Yeah.
I, interestingly, have farmed rice before, and I farmed half bag paddy of rice, and I got about 10 bags of rice. So that for me is an investment that yielded returns. So I totally understand when you say that we need to leverage financial instruments. What kind of financial instruments? We need to be sure that it's an enabling environment through and through. Sensitization and awareness campaign is also very important. I also liked that you mentioned healthcare, and I know that you do quite some work regarding solar solutions in healthcare. And so I'd like to just come back to you at this point. How can developing regions best integrate solar power with energy storage systems to enhance 24/7 power availability for essential medical equipment while managing seasonal variations in renewable energy generation?
Thank you very much, Irene. Okay, I just want to get some points from what Mr. Ola said. For now, we use gas as a transition energy, and because solar energy is not very stable, like now, you wouldn't have access to solar energy because it's nights, and so you need to rely on an alternative power, which can be energy that has been stored in a battery. That's when you use it at night. And then for industries that consume high amount of energy, they will need a higher capacity or something that can store energy for in large capacity. And that's where we have to use systems like hybrid systems, and also use high capacity batteries. These are avenues, where you can store energy and use it at a time where the solar energy is not already accessible. And then, of course, gas. Gas power can actually power a lot of energy systems that require high amount of energy, so we can also take advantage of gas power. Yes, we are all running towards renewable, but we're not there yet. So we still need to rely on gas power to help power some high capacity
energy consuming equipment.
Yeah.
And I'll come to you, Ola, regarding high energy consuming equipment, because I was having a conversation a while ago with someone who runs like an exclusive X-ray here in the country, and he was really complaining about the cost of diesel and the cost of generally running his facility, and how the bill has to be transferred to the customers, right? And it was just a very sad story, really. And then I asked him, why don't you use solar? And he says, that some of his equipment are really energy intensive in terms of their consumption, and so he needs like things that would solutions, yes. And so I would like to come to you now regarding that as a way of leveraging gas to power when it comes to health access, given the critical need for uninterrupted power in healthcare facilities. What innovations in gas turbine technology or microgrid systems have proven most effective for providing backup power to hospitals in areas with unstable grid connections? In fact, even in areas with stable grid connections.
Thank you very much, Irene. Unfortunately, I think as a people or as a society, we are not where we are supposed to be in terms of how we address some of these challenges. And what do I mean by that? For you to dedicate a gas to power turbine, to any facility, number one, the consumption has to be really high, because gas turbines are heavy duty equipment, but the way and the landscape of our healthcare facilities in Nigeria today, it will be almost economically impossible for you to have a dedicated, say, power plant, for an health facility. But that being said, how can we now solve for power availability in our healthcare facilities? So I would say first, we have to look at clusterization. I'm a big fan of clusterization, because when the weight of, or when the burden of cost and capital is spread over multiple stakeholders, you are able to spread the cost, and eventually the cost begins to make sense. In any healthcare facility today, for instance, in Nigeria, the data shows that the consumption is just, I think, between about 100 kilowatt hours to maybe like 700 kilowatt hours per day. And that's because our healthcare facilities are not very energy intensive. Not all healthcare facilities have heavy duty equipment, but the ones that have it, unfortunately, still have to go back to the grid. And that's where, the issue of how do we prioritize a particular sector comes in. And I'm sorry I'm repeating this, but as it is in the agricultural sector, in the healthcare sector, if we are really serious, there needs to be a prioritization of power supply to the healthcare facilities. Yes, the cost of power has also gone up. Per kilowatt hour now is really high compared to what it used to be. And many of the healthcare facilities are already complaining. But in a situation where we have the government stepping in to say, okay, for ensuring energy supply to this sector, we have to look at a special tariff, because you shouldn't charge a hotel the same way you charge a hospital. Yes, they all bill their patrons, but what one of them does is more critical, to the economy. Because if the people are not well, the well-being of a society brings about prosperity to that society. So if you really want to drive prosperity in the entire society, you must prioritize access to good health. So in what way can the health insurance scheme, in what way can the government policies be channeled to encourage hospitals and healthcare facilities to be able to get affordable energy? Because yes, I'm able to connect them to the grid, but if a hospital is paying millions of naira in electricity bill every month, definitely the patients will have to pay for it because it's not a social service. So how then can we now make that a facility or make it a policy that the government is able to step in? Because the entity that has the muscle to really intervene when the market is not favorable, because as it is today, the market is not favorable to the healthcare facilities. So who do we need to step in is the big brother, and the big brother in the house is the government. So I would say that for reliable access to electricity, the healthcare facility still has to rely on public utility, because that's where you have the lowest maintenance cost. If you're running a 500 kVA generator today, you know how much of diesel that will consume. Apart from diesel consumption, the pollution. When you talk about the pollution, then the cost of maintenance, because at every maybe 200 hours, you have to bring it down for maintenance. That cost will go back to the patient. And any patient that is not able to afford that, that's why you find people in very sorry states, when they go to hospitals. And unfortunately, some people don't have a choice. They just have to go to hospitals that don't have the facilities because of affordability. So this is, to me, it should be a service that the government must step in and intervene. Because without that, the truth is energy is not cheap. Generating energy either in the conventional way using the fossil fuel and gas, or through the renewable, solar and the likes, doesn't come cheap. So two ways: one, government, and two, clusters. If you have, for instance, the whole of, say, Kuje industrial, like we have industrial access, we can also have medical access, right? Such that you put in all the investments, all the equipment, spread the costs, have residential there, have a mix, so that the eventual cost to the facility and at the end of the day to the patient does not become too burdensome.
Thank you for those points, particularly the clusterization bit, which is very important. I literally pulled out a quote from that. Burden of cost and capital is spread over multiple stakeholders, and then the cost begins to make sense, which is typically very, very important. And an example would definitely be one of the issues that I had to sort of oversee some time ago, where a patient was supposed to do like a full body assessment. Because of the cost, of course, more of it out of the fact that power generation was high, had to literally do half of, so it's like they say you're paralyzed on two legs, and then you just have to do the test for one leg because you don't have. So you see how it's literally it literally is just like a spiral, right? One thing impacts on the other and then impacts on everything else. I would come to you, Beauty, at this point. Again, we were discussing and we talked about, well, sometimes the byproduct that we get from agriculture, because again, for example, rice, we have the rice husk. What do we do with it? Are we able to, leverage it to do some other things? In this case now, generate power that will be useful for those communities. So I'd like to come to you with
What opportunities do you see for agricultural waste to energy projects to support rural healthcare facilities? And what are the key logistical considerations for maintaining a reliable biomass supply chain for such facilities?
Okay, I think recently we were in one of our policy making sessions. I belong to a platform, Competitive African Rice Platform for Sustainable Development. So one of the issues we are discussing was the rice sector, the processing sector. Most of the mills are shutting down. I don't know if most people are aware about that, and it's because of the energy. The cost is high. And we're now looking at, okay, the husk, there's a lot of waste coming from rice processing when you process the husk. What can we do with the husk? Yeah, fine. People that are into animal feed production, they assess the husk, the rice bran, and whatever, they use it for animal feed production. But right now, we are trying to optimize rice production. Can we use this husk to power the rice milling plant in a way that it reduces carbon in the air? Because at the end of the day, we keep talking about healthcare. We are saying climate change. It has come to stay, right? And the carbon that goes into the air reduces the amount of oxygen that we are. Now it's affecting us environmentally. Time will come, we'll get to that stage where it's going to be a health issue. All the amount of carbon that you have inhaled from your I pass to generator. People living in rural communities that use firewood and whatever, right? So our president now said there's someone that actually has a new solution that you can use horse, convert it to energy to power your milling plant, and it's going to mill the husk, to thresh it to the husk, to polish it, color sort, and you have your rice in your bag, well graded. But the problem is scalability. And in fact, that solution itself, it's going to, it has a component that shocks the carbon. So the carbon doesn't even go into the air, because at the end of the day, climate change is here. We are looking at how to reduce carbon on the air. I'm making emphasis on that. Why? Because I work with farmers every day, and I see the problem they are already having now. We're talking about flooding that it's coming from, is it Cameroon or which axis that comes in from the dam? But now climate change is what is actually escalating it, right? And I'm from Kogi State. I live in a place where we are the plains where every now and then, so it was affecting lives, and people were like, okay, my rice can survive. Now your rice cannot even survive the flood. It takes it all away. So if we are going to harness this and address the issue, I'll still go back to that assessment, right? You're able to understand there's aspect of Kogi State that are into vegetables, and there's another aspect that are into rice. Okay, so if you now compare this waste from Ejiba axis and the waste from Ida, Olamaboro, Ibaje axis, they are into rice farming. Please, you now want to assess the waste from here. Can you convert it to power their primary healthcare center in Ejiba? Is it enough to power a primary healthcare center? Right? There are ways that they do. It's not just solar that you can use to do. I'm not very conversant that aspect, right? You use it, and even some people use it to power their poultry houses, to give them small cooling. If you have animal dungs, you turn the waste, your compost, your rice, whatever. Then you now compare the people that are doing rice. The amount of horse that is coming there, you want to assess how much energy can you get from this axis? How much energy can you get from this axis? What can you do with this energy? That energy, can it power healthcare? The energy here, can it power primary health centers, or can it power the rice milling clusters? And they don't have to go and be buying diesel and whatever, and the rice keeps, the price keeps rising, like when you put yeast in dough, and the next minute the dough is all over like this. That's how the price of rice is going right now. So we still have to do this energy assessment and look at these critical issues. You take them one after the other. It's not a solution that we can provide at once, but we have to start from somewhere, achieve results here, take another aspect, achieve results. And you might want to know that some of these sectors, they have a synergy, an entanglement. Imagine if you are able to solve healthcare, that means you are affecting their livelihood. They can do better. Productivity is going to affect their productivity on the farm. So, but one key problem that is going to affect it again is that logistic. These rural areas, they don't have roads. They don't have access road. You want to bring paddy out to Lokoja International Market. Do you know how much it's going to cost you? Because, yeah, I worked in Ibaji. I was staying in Ida because there's no light there, there's no water, there's no road. And I spent 30,000 naira on bike, 3.5 hours from Ida to Ibaji because there's no road. So it's so bad there's no road that there's no vehicle that can carry people, it's bike. So when they are going to carry goods, it's most of those, what they call them, those, not even, tricycles will even go some distance. There's a time that they are going to charge you excess. You're even wondering what are you paying for. It's those kind of pickup that are dead. That is just the body part and the engine. So it's just the driver. It's just the driver and the conductor. And they can spend the whole day traveling just to carry fertilizer down there, bring paddy. So all these things add to cost of production.
Okay.
Right? So at the end of the day, it's still going to be an energy assessment. You take them in bits, like he said, sectors, you take them in bits, address them, and at the end of the day, before you know it, they fall into components, and you're now seeing that, okay, it's sustainable.
Thank you very much, Beauty, for that. And I see that you are really advocating for identifying specific energy needs and addressing them. Ola is then saying that when you've identified those energy needs, clusterize these guys, and then you spread the cost so that it then makes sense, correct? I'll just come to the audience to mention or to remind us that this is a dialogue, and I'll be coming to you in a bit in case you have questions or contributions to make based off the conversations that we've been having on here. We're going to move to LNG, okay? And if you remember when we started, I mentioned that I had an auntie who lost a daughter when she was using firewood. Now, I had mentioned when we also just started that all of these things affect us in one way or the other. Because by the time the house got exploded, it was adulterated kerosene and fuel that she had used, and then the thing just exploded. They were trying to turn on her kerosene lantern close to where they were boiling water to shower for the night. And so it was a terrible experience. The house exploded. The young daughter, 8 or so, passed away. My auntie survived, luckily. Her son survived. But they came back from the hospital and had to continue using firewood because they don't have an alternative energy source. And the hospital they went to, was there light? We don't know. So you see, like, everything is just really connected. And so I'd like to come to you again, Sophia, because I know that you do quite a number of things as well when it comes to LNG. What innovations in electric cooking technologies have shown the most promise in reducing both energy costs and indoor air pollution, which is so, related to what I have just shared, particularly in areas with growing renewable energy access, and even in areas that don't have energy access at all?
Okay, thank you very much, Irene. Of recent, there has been a great improvement in energy access, especially with regards to solar energy. We've had projects that have been implemented by several organizations like Rural Electrification Agency, GIZ, and a host of them, where they go to communities, carry out assessments, and then they put these solar grids, mini grids or micro grids in these communities. And they also have organizations that say, okay, since you have a solar micro or mini grid in your community, we want to introduce to you energy efficient stoves. And then they go in and they provide this solution. They have a variety of energy solutions. They have the electric pressure cookers, they have induction cook stoves, they have stoves that are powered by solar energy. So all of these are various innovations that have been introduced to communities, especially communities that already have a certain level of solar and renewable energy already in existence there. And so for these cook stoves, you know, to penetrate a lot of communities, we need to address the issue of renewable infrastructure in these communities. And it still boils down to the same thing: money, policy, two key things that would drive the growth in this sector. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie, for that. Money and policies, you can't play with that. Ola had also mentioned that, but I also just come to you, Ola, as well. I mean, you've been in the space of harnessing gas and converting to power, so it only makes sense that you contribute to this conversation. Exactly. So considering the infrastructural challenges which Sophie has rightly just pointed out with LPG distribution for cooking in Nigeria, how can gas to power electricity be integrated in the drive towards clean cooking?
Okay, thank you very much. And the simple way to do that is just to electrify cooking. Everywhere, you know, globally, every country that is serious about driving down their CO2 emission, you know, and also their contribution to global warming, look towards electrification. So electrifying processes that typically would be driven by conventional energy sources. So the transition went from using the firewood and what have you to using petroleum products, charcoal, and then to gas, which is a bit cleaner, you know, for cooking. And now the real clean cooking is when you use electricity. So how do we then enhance that in terms of balancing the infrastructural challenges in transmitting this LPG, especially in our country? First, I would say for the existing real estate, for the existing infrastructure that we have already missed that chance to a very large extent. Because if you try to lay a gas pipe, LPG gas pipe, within Wuse 2 today, it will be a big challenge, right? But I see it more as the new developing areas. How can the government or how can the real estate developers inculcate gas distribution network to estates? So like it's being done in other climates, you know, you're building an estate and you are not just providing for electricity network, but you're also providing for gas supply network, whereby you have a gas gathering station close by and you are able to meter everybody. But particularly, we all must move towards electrification of the cooking process. And unfortunately, we like to import used products from, you know, the developed world. But the guys that are exporting those things out of those places, they are doing it for a purpose. It's not because they like us, but it's because they are moving to more efficient equipment. So if somebody sells you a microwave oven, for instance, or even an electric cooker, today says, okay, it is Tokumbo, and you buy it, you can bet that you'll be spending more in terms of energy consumption compared to the new generation equipment. So what countries that are serious about this are doing is subsidizing this electric cooking stoves. So China went through their own phase. It was more like, you know, a strategic move to say, guys, we are transitioning to clean cooking. And to encourage people to transition, we will subsidize this. So whatever we must have gained from, or whatever we must have recovered from suspending subsidy in some sectors, which I would not want to mention, I think we can start diverting them to subsidizing, you know, for areas of our lives that can really contribute. Because, like you said, I also was speaking. I met with someone at the sauna recently, and he was not very sure about, the effect of sauna on human body, and he was hesitant. And he asked, and I said, "Well, this is not open fire. This is just hot stone, emitting dry steam." He said because he lost someone to cooking with charcoal. That the woman had, I think she sells something in, somewhere where the guy grew up. And for many years, that's her trade, cooking with that charcoal. And she had cancer eventually. So for us not to, as a country, spend more in treating cancers and very strange medical diseases, we can start being strategic about how we spend money as a nation. So would it be more beneficial to us or for us to start subsidizing the electrification of some sectors? Talking about cooking, even agriculture, because driving your agricultural equipment with diesel or petrol is no longer sustainable, and it will increase the carbon footprint of your operation. So for you to be able to make sure that we conform with the transition, the energy transition, and also improve the energy mix, there has to be serious action with regards to making it affordable to the people.
You see, I think you are shaking a lot of tables here, particularly when you say that some of the things that subsidy has been removed, we can repurpose them. And the question came to mind, which I don't have a response to, but since this is a dialogue and it's a Q&A and a conversation type, in case you also don't have a response, you can go and do your research. The subsidy that has been removed from the item that you mentioned, where is it being repurposed to other items that have been mentioned here today? Does anybody have an answer to that? It's a dialogue. How did you get here?
I didn't want to shake the table too much. But I think someone raised his hand also.
Okay, all right then. So this is our
Someone
mini
raised his
break,
hand.
and then all right, go on, please. You just introduce yourself. Can we get a microphone? Thank you. Please be sure it's turned on.
Okay, the name is Hamza. I am the founder and CEO of Zaris Consult. We're also into energy, provision of energy solutions to individuals as well as estates and communities. So I think this is our audience session, right?
Right.
So maybe I'll just go straight to one or two questions, observations I have. One thing I think I've observed that is missing in all of our discussion today is the role of state governments in the energy sector as well as agriculture. Going by the 1999 Constitution, land is domiciled is within the purview of the state government. So, of course, we should expect that agriculture should be something that the state governors should take full charge of. Now, that brings me to the question to Safia Ahmed Beauty. In all of your dealings, in Kogi State, how have you interacted or interfaced with the state government as regards the agricultural sector in respect of logistics that you've so much spoken about, Have you, so that they can capture it in their plans, So maybe if they want to construct roads and so on and so forth, it will make it a lot easier for them to convey goods and services from the farms all the way to the markets and maybe agricultural, industrial hubs and stuff like that. So the second question is to the engineer, Ola. How do you advise, now that the electricity sector has been decentralized, states can generate electricity, distribute it? Because sometimes I sit down and I think, what if 36 states, generate 1,000 megawatts each within the space of 4 years? What we have is 36,000 megawatts generated and distributed. So you can see we've really recorded so much feed. How do you advise, because the states now, this is new to them, how do you recommend that we nurture, we as stakeholders, and probably maybe the federal government, but I can see there's no representative of the federal government here. So how do you recommend we reach out to the states, nurture them in the area of policy formulation, partnership with international agencies, donor agencies, sourcing for funds, so that they can grow that sector too, and hopefully we'll get to, a point where we can attain energy sustainability. And then lastly, congratulations to Electricity Hub for the feat. It is no mean feat at all. 100 months, is commendable. I've been here a couple of times. I will recommend that going forward also, maybe our discussion should revolve around how we liaise, how we make inroads into the states, so that the states can pick up this energy business as well as, the agricultural sector too. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamza. Thank you so much. Do we have anyone else in the room who would like to ask a question, make a contribution before we come to the panelists? All right then. So I'll come to you, Beauty. He asked you about your interaction with the government.
Thank you, Hamza. I think that was a very thoughtful question. So basically, I'm an extension specialist by profession. So I work with farmers, provide them support. So the back end of it is that most times you are able to identify issues in the communities that you work with, and you're able to draw the attention of the stakeholders to bear. Okay, I've worked in this XYZ community. I think if this is done, you can optimize cassava production here, this and that. And over a decade, I've been working in northern Nigeria, and I've concentrated in Kogi State in the last 5 years. And I've not held any political appointment. I'm a private extension service provider, but I've made publications at each point. I've worked in Kogi West, I've worked in Kogi Central, I've worked in Kogi East. I can tell you the disparities, the peculiarities, and their challenges, right? So when I did that project in Ibaji, I actually made a publication. I made a post on social media, and I tagged virtually everybody that was involved, the state governor, the deputy governor, the commissioner, everybody. And yes, some people responded. And they said, oh, it's an island. I said, well, it's an island, but we are doing so much. Ibaji itself is feeding 4 states surrounding Kogi State. The rise, the amount of capital flights coming out from that local government, if it comes into Kogi State, it's a lot of IGR, right? That's what they call it. I'm not an economist. So, but you don't want to put in the infrastructure to bring this IGR into the state. So the rice now flies the river. It goes to Anambra, Utocha axis, it goes to Asaba, it goes to Edo, and is it Enugu, right? Yeah, about 4 states there. So when they were going to do Omi rice, I don't know if you know about Omi rice in Kogi. Mm-hmm. Omi rice should have been situated along that axis where there is concentration of rice production clusters. But probably maybe it's a political decision. I don't know. I wasn't on that table where that decision was made. But Omi rice was taken to a different angle of Kogi State, which is Kogi West. It's just like you having rice cluster in Nyanya axis, and you take the rice mill to Zuba. Fine. Abuja FCT has good access roads, but I will tell you that it will take you almost a day to travel to take your rice to come out from Ibadan to Ida, which is just Ibadan is one local government, Ida is one local government. To bring rice from Ibadan to Ida, it will take you a whole day before you now start transporting from Ida to Ejiba, which is towards the boundary of Kogi State and Kwara State. So I don't know what brought that decision, but fine, the rice is there. It's not operating, or maybe it's under operating. Let me use that word. But how is the paddy that we are producing getting to that place? Because if the paddy in Ibadan is getting there, I don't think that mill will be under operating. And if that mill itself is even operating, imagine the amount of job creation it's going to bring to bear. So that's that, right? I tried my best, but I can't go beyond that. And I would shock you, the former Commissioner for Agriculture, the last tenure administration, and the SC on Agriculture, they are from Ibadan local government. The current Commissioner for Agriculture, I've had a meeting with him, he's from Ibadan local government, so he can't say he doesn't know what the problem is. So, but in my own empathetic, and I'm very concerned because I feel like I'm somebody that is driven by social impact. I was able to reach the focal person for Air Crystal in Kogi State, which is Barrister Ladi Jatu. I don't know if you know about her. And I told her, she was like, yes, she's doing road. She does, it's part of their scope for Air Crystal, watershed, erosion control, whatever. They do some infrastructural road. I was like, what can we do about it? But she was like, I was able to show her a picture of what the area looks like. So Ibadan local government is where oil was found in Kogi State. Yes. So I was able to discuss with her, and she was like, oh, that's capital intensive. Before they'll be able to do that kind of, she explained it some technical terms, which I don't know that much. I'm a farmer, and I prefer to stick to what I understand. So, but she said, are there other solutions that she doesn't think that it might fly, but she will press. And I told her, okay, a cosmetic solution. There are plants that survive in water, and they can even draw this water, so that during the rainy season, the gura vehicles that go there and come can even go, because when it gets very, very floody, that place is not motorable until it's dry season. That's why they have to take their rice along the other axis. They fly the water to different states. It doesn't even come to Kogi State anymore. I said, okay, can we plant cactus? I don't know if people know about cactus. Yes. Can we plant cactus? That's how we maintain it. It doesn't drain all the water in the land and leaves it infertile, but just within the pathway. And she asked me to bring a proposal, and I submitted a document. And I think, and she was very happy about it. She was willing to go on with the project. So, but in my very busy and clumsy schedule, I've only been to her office once to do a follow-up, and I've not had time to go back. So probably maybe if I've gone back, would have known when it has gotten to. So I can say maybe probably that's just a cosmetic solution. But on the other hand, you made mention about us not talking about the government. I would want to come back to what Mr. Ola was saying about subsidizing cooking initiatives. Sometime years ago, I was in Ghana. A roadside seller, a woman that's just a micro-entrepreneur. She uses gas to fry akara, fry plantain. She's not using charcoal. That was around 2019 when I went for my mini MBA. And I was surprised. How can she afford it? Because if I calculate everything in her business, I don't think it's up to 50,000 naira. That's her capital. I'm not sure, but how is she able to maintain it? And it was a government initiative. So that brings me back to the government doing PPP to see that, okay, these cooking initiatives are adopted in rural communities where there is a lot of carbon consumption as a means of cooking. So you don't want to come and make their life more difficult, telling them that you have to use gas when you can't give them gas. Some people that they just walk around the road, they pick sticks and they make fire. They are trying to survive, right? So if the government is going to subsidize or even fund cooking initiatives, there has to be demonstration, there has to be sensitization for people to adopt it. But then again, that money is not going to be lost because there's climate financing. So because it's a pro-climate initiative. So if the government spends money to subsidize, finance, and share this around, they are going to go and get that money back in climate financing. But just the way Nigerian is, sorry to say, we are not talking about it right now. It's when that fund is almost gone, that's where we'll now be crouching around it. But there are people coming into Nigeria now talking about carbon credit. They will ask you to plant trees, take pictures, and they go back and they assess climate fund. Thank you.
That's an entirely different and, well, not complex conversation. Climate financing, carbon credits. Yep. For those people, for example, that are into clean cook stoves, for example, you can literally get carbon credits that you sell, right, to an even international and wider market. But just to still stay within the conversation, and by the way, we have some people who are joining us virtually. We have a couple questions, but I'll just come to you quickly, Ola. Hamza had talked about decentralization of electricity sector and the likes. Do you want to quickly respond to that?
Sure.
And then we'll move on.
Yes, and that's a very brilliant question. Thank you very much. Yes, the Electricity Act 2023 has opened the markets, for other players beyond the federal government. And I think, like you said, it's a low-hanging fruit to be able to complement what is being done at the federal level. But the truth is, not all the 36 states may be able to do that because of the requirements, capital requirements, accessibility to the fuel that is required, depending on the type of electricity that they plan to, depending on the source to generate the electricity. So how do we, knowledge share, partner with the right people, develop the state's capability, for this electricity generation? I would say first is we must utilize the resources of some of our retirees. I think that's one thing that we don't typically do well in this part of the world, right? Many NEPA, as I don't want to say bad, but many people say the full meaning of NEPA is not very, it's not very nice, right? But that entity has churned out a lot of experts in electricity in this country. And I believe in its very glory days, we had NEPA staff, going to other sub-region, Western African region, and even some other parts of Africa, to train other engineers. We have people coming into Nigeria to get tutelage under the leadership of those people. And many of them, retired, and then they're probably back home farming or doing other businesses. But how do we harness the knowledge? Now that the state governments are empowered to generate electricity, how can you leverage some of these talents that are from your state? I think that's one thing that we all need to start looking at. And for the states that are able to generate, that have the capability to generate, either because of nearness to the source or availability of funds, there are also foreign partners that are willing to come in to support, because the issue of electricity generation in Africa, in this part of the world, is very important to other climates. As we know, there is, and not to go into geopolitics, but there is a focus to kind of move production away from Southern Asia or from China, to other parts of the world that has the capability. And when you look at Africa, Africa has, cheap labor. Africa has very affordable labor. But what Africa does not have is the infrastructure. So if a state has shown the willingness, to generate even as little as 500 megawatt or 200 or 300 megawatt, I'm sure there are, foreign partners that are willing to bring in the capital, have that partnership of, collaboration. Let's run it for this period. You take over after some time. So I believe those are areas that the technical know-how can also be leveraged. But I agree with you, if we leave it only to the federal government or to private investors, we may never be able to achieve what we want to achieve or what we ought to achieve as a nation. Because today we have an installed base of, say about 12 gigawatts, but we are able to only distribute and transmit 5,000 or 5 gigawatts. That's not even up to what a state like maybe Chicago or some other industrial states generate, because they are serious about it. You need electricity, you need energy to be able to drive industrialization.
Thank you very much, Ola. I would come to you, Sophia, with the question from the online participant, GD Pratt, who says, how do we backward integrate to scale down cost? Are the states in position to attract capital and actually maintain our internal generation with the new power laws? Any other member of the panel can also respond to this. Let me just take that again. So, how do we backward integrate to scale down our costs? And I believe we're talking about generation costs, because again, we've been talking about how intensive power generation is. Ola mentioned that power is not cheap, and it's something that I believe everybody here in the room agrees with. For those that have generator, at least that some people have now chosen to sleep without light and just enjoy what nature can give, as against powering the generator overnight. I see a lot of people smiling. So yes, I'm in the right circle of people. So how do we backward integrate to scale down our costs? That's pretty much leveraging what we have in-house. I know that Ola had also talked about what we don't have, maybe infrastructure, but in terms of manpower and some other things that we may be able to get from Nigeria here, how can we leverage that really to scale up power?
Okay, thank you very much, Irene. First of all, we need public-private partnership. Now, public-private partnership in the sense that the government has a role to play, the private sector has a role to play, and the community. Now, the government creates an enabling environment, creates the right policies, and writes some of the financial instruments that will be required. The government can provide guarantees, that can facilitate energy generation, grants, subsidies, tax incentives on, let's say, importation of clean energy equipment and all that. And then the private sector has a role to play. Now, the private sector brings in innovation, because they want to see profitability in anything they are doing. They bring in the innovation, they bring in some of the finances as well to ensure, and they bring in operational excellence. We've seen a situation where the government or the public sector handles some things and then you don't see the operational excellence. So that's what the private sector brings in. They bring operational excellence to ensure that whatever is being done is sustainable on the long run. And then finally, community. You and I, we have a role to play in energy generation, energy access as a whole. So people still today will never use gas to cook. They still see gas as harmful, gas as something that can kill, So we need to bring this message back home to community people. You find that some of these farmers, if you still go to them and tell them, okay, we have mechanized equipment you can use, some will tell you, I will not use it. I prefer to use my hoe and my cutlass. So that is where we have to also involve the community. We have to sensitize them. We have to educate them on even maintenance culture. Nigeria, we need to also, as a whole, we need that maintenance culture. The sensitization is very important. The education is very important. And also, when you're planning and implementing a project, you need to bring in the community. They have to be there right from the planning phase, because we see a lot of interventions that does not align to the needs of the community, that does not align to the needs of the people. You see, for instance, they go to a community and they say, oh, they're distributing cook stoves, and then the community receives these cook stoves, but they don't know how to maintain it. They don't know how to just fix a nut that comes out to enable the stove keep working or last longer. And then the next thing, the stove is abandoned. So you see the investment that has been put into the project, just being thrown into the air. So these are the three major factors that should be put in place to ensure that, energy generation, energy access is improved in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. I really love the bit you mentioned about private sector bringing in innovation and operational excellence. There's a common phrase that we hear around here in Nigeria where you say government has no business doing business. You give the regulation, ensure that the environment is good enough for the business owners to really run very smoothly. And then you see that level of operational excellence. And the bit that everyone has really been hammering on this evening is the public-private partnership. That would lead me to our conversation on transportation. Who knows the city in Nigeria currently that is really leading on EV manufacturing and usage?
Lagos.
Exactly. And Lagos has, as of date, signed quite a number of deals to produce EVs, and that would also come with some level of infrastructure, your power stations, because again, when I was seeing Tesla cars in the US, you must have power stations, and then you just leave it there like a baby that is really trying to ensure that it takes in and absorbs all of, the mother's milk and whatnot. I'll come to you, Ola, because while we're trying to develop and ensure that that infrastructure base is where it should be, as cities transition to electric buses and cars and charging infrastructure, what role do you see gas-powered generators as intermediate backup solutions for charging stations, and how can they be optimally integrated to ensure reliable public transportation? Because again, we're talking about the fact that, okay, now we're going to EVs. The cost of petrol alone is almost ridiculous for the average person to afford. We also are talking about how we can deepen our energy access, right? That means while we are still building on this infrastructure, we have gas already available, and that's where you come in. So I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
Okay, thank you very much. And so electrifying transportation, using EVs and the likes, right? The role of gas power generated electricity can best be optimized when we are able to have dedicated charging stations. So, and when those dedicated charging stations are, like a public utility, or it could also be a private investment, because I know there are a couple of guys that are trying to set up charging stations and commercialize it now, right? So what gas power does is it provides, and this was mentioned earlier, it provides that reliable and stable electricity. So in a case where the electricity that you have stored in a battery, drains, the access to utility power is endless as long as the grid is active, right? So what needs to happen is as the adoption of electric vehicles increases, there needs to be a serious consideration of investment in centralized charging stations, whereby there can then be a dedicated grid power supply, because the power that is generated from our gas equipment are still mostly passed onto the grid. That aside, when we now talk in terms of the microgrid or the IPPs, we can also, in a way, have IPPs, in partnership with some of these centralized charging stations. Like we have in Aba now, where, Professor Bath was able to commission his power plant and also ring fence the power plant for the Aba industrial area. So that can, in itself, also accommodate a centralized charging station for that region. And we can then take that model from that point to maybe somewhere in Lagos where we have other IPPs, Rivers State, Port Harcourt, Kano, and the like. So in all, we must make sure that we scale the electricity need for this charging station, because if I only want to dedicate power to my house to be able to charge my electric vehicle, I would have to pay more compared to if I opened up my charging station up to everybody here to say, okay, you pick your time. You have an online link. Pick your time that you want to come and charge your car. It's 4 hours. I charge you 2,000 naira per hour. It alleviates the cost burden on me. So getting that dedicated, reliable, and affordable power comes with the scale of use. So centralizing the consumption and making it open to the public. That's, my own submission in that regard.
And if you may, I see that at the time when the price of petrol skyrocketed, people started using gas in their cars.
Yes.
How reliable do you think that we have what it takes to scale that kind of gas use for our automobile?
Absolutely. And I have a friend in the room. Okay, I can't say him. I know he's an expert in the adoption of CNG, and he's very passionate about it. And, I see that the government is driving that initiative, and I would say that it's a laudable one. Nigeria, before now, have only concentrated on crude oil. So we are blessed with crude oil, we are blessed with abundant natural gas, but our focus has always been just on crude oil. So, but we must be able to commercialize gas, which is also there in fact, we have a larger reserve of gas compared to crude oil. So do we have the resources? Do we have the natural resource to be able to adopt CNG? Yes, we do. Do we have, and CNG does not really require too much of technicality. It's more around safety, making sure that you have the right quality of cylinder to be able. I know the issues we've had with maybe explosion have been, few people that try to cut corners. But if you stick to the specification, it is safe and it is cheaper. I don't know so much about the economics, but from what I learned, with a 3,500 or 5,000 gas fill, you can drive to Kaduna and come back.
Okay.
You can't try that with 3,000 naira petrol. I don't think you can get to Yanya.
Maybe Garki are back.
That's just 3 liters, right? Exactly. So yes, I believe we have the gas in abundance. We just need to now come up with a discipline, because many Nigerians, the challenge we have is we like to cut corners. So even when they say this thing costs 20 naira, we still want to negotiate.
To 10 naira.
And when we negotiate, some people don't want to lose us as a customer, so they would rather give you a 3 mm thick cylinder instead of a 5 mm or a 6 mm thick cylinder. And the people that have designed the cylinder to be 6 mm, they know the reason. Because the pressure to which you have to charge the cylinder can only be accommodated by that size. So when you now bring in something cheaper, you are exposing yourself to a risk of explosion. So yes, that's an area that I believe we can harness as a nation, considering our large, reserve of natural gas.
Thank you very much, Ola. I'll come to you, Sophia. What strategies have proven most effective for developing renewable energy power charging networks that can support both public and private electric vehicles, particularly in regions with emerging power grids and varying levels of infrastructural development?
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll just take
Sorry,
behavioral.
it's
Okay, sorry.
Sophia
for the sake of this our panel, or for those of you that are just coming. So we have Sapphire on the panel and we have Sophia on the panel. But Sapphire's English name is Beauty, and so I decided so that I don't confuse everybody. Yeah. So Sophia, that's for you.
So thank you
Sorry
very
about
much,
that,
Beauty,
Sophia.
as well. Okay, for such a situation, we can use decentralized renewable energy systems and hubs, for areas.
Okay, let's take it up.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. For areas where we have emerging energy infrastructure, we can use decentralized energy charging hubs. It's already been implemented in a number of countries already using electric vehicles where either a solar microgrid, a micro or mini grid is being established, and then you have your charging hub there. So the charging hub is 100% renewable, 100% powered by solar. So that's one way. And then for areas where you still have some kind of unstable renewable energy source or supply, you can use battery swapping. For those that these vehicles, they have battery that stores energy. So you can have a hub that's into battery swapping. So once a battery is fully charged, one that is depleted can just be given and exchanged, and then you don't have to stay there waiting to charge. And then for areas that hard to reach areas, undeserved or reserved areas, we can use mobile charging options. So these mobile charging options, mobile charging hubs can actually get to these places, charge these vehicles, and then so these are various options that can be implemented for areas that are still yet to have stable renewable energy source.
All right, just to also pick from what you said. Now, Beauty, you're an extensions person, and you had mentioned how horrific some of the roads that leads to the market may be. But what have you seen in terms of e-mobility that supports agri-businesses? I know there are quite a number of initiatives. I know GAP is doing something in some parts of the country. But what have you seen in Kogi, and if you've also had an opportunity to move around the different states?
Okay. I think, in all fairness, I would say that in terms of rural access road, if you want to treat them state by state, there are some states that are actually doing better than the others. So, but at the end of the day, you still find that is still an issue. It's just that there's a level of improvement in some areas, whereas in some areas it's actually very critical. So even if I want to look at alternative
Energy sources?
energy sources, we still have to address the basic problem, which is the fact that there has to be that route for whatever energy access you are going to use to apply, whether it's electric or gas, to follow the road. There has to be that road, right? So, but at the same time, it's a normal knowledge that adoption level is very low when it comes to agrarians. So adoption of technologies at the minimest level of it for agrarians. They are laggards, so it takes a lot for them to adopt. So even if you want to do sensitization, awareness, at the end of the day, you have to do some demonstration. Pick some few persons, take them out for training from amongst them that they are going to pick themselves. So you have to use a CDD approach. Let them be the ones to give you the persons. You take them for training, they see what it looks like, and they come back, and you give them the solutions. They start using them as outliers, and the others can say, okay, this one is our person, is someone we trust, he can always tell us the truth. Is it going to be something that will bring us harm in the nearest future? Because agrarians have trust issues when it comes with them relating with people that come from the urban. They feel like that you are educated, you always want to use, take an advantage over them. But when you pick one person amongst them, it works very well. Okay. And I think if the government is able to do PPP, like I said, private-public partnership, you can always introduce this alternative solutions, and you test run them, and you are even able to identify maybe there are loopholes or conjunctions that you have to put in place for them to function very well. Like I talked about the access road. So I think this this should be a very good, it should serve as even a model for both adoption and also sustainability. Thank you.
I mean, I understand that sometimes with humans, and I think it's like a human thing, particularly when your level of exposure and education is quite limited, what you don't understand, you tend to kick against.
Definitely.
And so, how best do you think, in terms of this technological adoption for agrarians, because they are so important to us? It's just that the only time we remember the farmers that are in the farm is when you go to the market. Like I went to buy tomato. I went to the kitchen. They told me they were going to buy tomato. I saw a full basket of tomato. How much? 250,000. Why? It could just be because, for example, they don't have reliable transportation system to move it from
Even
the
marketing
farm
structures.
to the market.
There are poor
You know?
marketing structures as well.
And honestly, in about a month or two, I'm just being honest with all of us, that was when I really remember the farmers in the farm. I said, why? Because I had at that point felt like, oh my God, it took me to the literal farm. I had to start trying to picture what had happened that led to the cost of tomato being this expensive. But we really do not have to wait for that long, or these kinds of things to happen before we know the importance and value of helping these people adopt these technological initiatives. So what would you say, I'll come to you, I see your hand, but what would you say that we can do to help them adopt these technologies better?
Okay, so as an extension, is the best model is demonstration. So you just, like I said, you have to pick ones among them, train them, and also start demonstrating what it is that you want them to adopt. So for instance, you want them to adopt a software, you have to show them what it looks like, live with them, they're able to trust you and trust the process as well. So that's just it, you just have to demonstrate to them, and you now give them time. And they're able to see the result in manifestation, like they say, tested and trusted. So that's just it for them.
All right, thank you. I see a hand. Okay, I also see one in front, but I saw the hand at the back first. May we have a microphone taken to the gentleman? If you don't mind just introducing yourself.
My name is Benjamin Aduli. I run a company called Mechanized Agricultural Investment and Services Limited. We were set up in 2010, and our core mandate is, how do you take a subsistence farmer who is farming to eat to become a business farmer who is farming as a business? When we started, it was like walking in a jungle. What we did was decided to focus on just one value chain and demonstrate the practicality of what we are talking about. It has taken us 14 years to put together a working model. Today, within our network, we have 46,000 farmers in 9 states farming rice. We have developed the technologies that they can farm rice successfully. We have looked for capital that is patient, long-term, not the mad capital that Nigerian banks offer. We have developed the technologies for tractor as a service, irrigation as a service, satellite-based monitoring, input supply management, our own agric extension officers, everything end to end. And I will tell you, a farmer in our ecosystem with just 2 hectares of farmland, that is all you need to join our ecosystem, farming rice. We would give you the funding you need, It's a 5-year funding with 2-year moratorium. You start to pay back from the 3rd year. We will buy the paddy rice from you from the gate when you harvest it. And then we take it from there. The numbers are clear. If in 5 years you are not a millionaire, the wage in your village must be very strong. It is now that the development partners are taking interest in what we are doing. Now we are about to replicate that in Benue State. And now, within the next 4 weeks, we will be starting with a 200,000 farmers network in Benue State alone. The numbers are clear. These 200,000 farmers in Benue State alone can produce 84 million bags of 25 kg rice every year. One state. Just one state.
I thought he deserved a round of applause.
So,
I know we are not sleeping because our eyes are wide.
Now,
open.
what did we find out? I now met a company from India called Hawks Power System Limited that can use rice hawks to generate power. I've been chasing them and begging them now for past 4 months to come and work with me because my farmers can as well sell their hawks rather than throwing it away. That's new value. Just 4 weeks ago, I met a Carbon X company that is able to now add my farmers onto their ecosystem to measure the carbon that can be generated from the farmer, and they will now get extra money for free from carbon credit. Why is all of this possible? Focus. And when we started, we concluded there was no government in Nigeria. Tito, I don't believe there's government in Nigeria. Tito, I don't believe there's government in Nigeria. I don't think so. So we never expected anything from government. We just forgot that they exist. But guess what? We will get to a point where they will look for us. Because if they do not talk to us, they can't win the next election. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. But there's a government in Nigeria, I should say that. And perhaps you want to package what it is you have done and speak to the right voices. You know, and I think there's a lot of potential there. I would also say that I like the critical thinking and broad spectrum thinking in their model. The fact that you are not just focused on the farmers alone, but now you see that the husk which Beauty had been mentioning, how you can use it to generate power. They're already talking to people who can do that. We're talking about carbon credit. I think it was Ola that mentioned carbon credit earlier, climate financing. Sophie has also been really talking about investment and all of that. So you see how all of these things really just tie together. Who knows what value, financial value, rice production in a single year in Nigeria is? So, for example, if it was an exam question, they'll say the rice market in Nigeria is X.
You see, there are some things you see, some data you see, you cry for this country. I'm going to use example of Thailand to show you why I say we are not serious. Now, the entire economy of Thailand is tied to one product, rice. There are about 6.8 million rice farmers in Thailand. When they start planting, the entire economy is shut down because they all go to plant. But guess what? There are 37 byproducts from rice in Thailand. Thailand has 3 universities that is exclusively focused on rice. 3. They have the training, they have the technology end to end. And they have built the entire economy around one product, rice.
So they have their comparative
So they,
advantage.
exactly.
Competitive advantage
Now,
is rice.
the case of Nigeria, we are just consumers. We don't produce. Let me give you some data. So you ask a question. Rice in Nigeria can run this country. You know why? Because we have become a rice-dependent country.
It's a $3 billion. Let me get that data correctly. So rice production in Nigeria annually is a $3 billion per year industry. Who ate rice today?
Everybody. Everybody.
So we're just going to do a random sampling here. Who had rice? It's an active random sampling. You could just show by a raise, right? So we just keep eating, but as you're eating, some of us don't think about the economic value that, this brings to bear. I think it was Beauty that mentioned, she said, if we eat every day, then we should be farming every day. And when some of us pay so much attention to the white-collar job as against going to the farms, I know some people in their minds are saying, oh, security issues. But imagine how many of us are in Nigeria? If we really go into those farms and then we say we want to farm. I remember I was having a conversation with my husband. He said, if we really pay attention to agriculture, we should also be deploying some of our military men to the farms. That's how serious it should be. Because it's only one who is alive and eats properly and is healthy that can function, and that's how critical this conversation is. But thank you so much for your point. We need to rush on now to our final question, which is typically on partnerships. I mean, we've said a whole lot about partnerships this evening, but just to sort of tie everything together, I would come to you, Sophie. Okay? So from your experience, what are the key components of successful PPP in renewable energy projects that have achieved both reliable power delivery and community buy-in, particularly in underserved and unserved regions?
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, I'll mention public-private partnership where clear roles and descriptions, clear responsibilities have been outlined. So there is no misunderstanding as to what each party is supposed to achieve. For instance, the government, I have mentioned before now, the government can create enabling framework. The private sector brings in innovation, finance, operational excellence, and then the community has the role to play. Now, in all of these three vital key stakeholders, there has to be inclusive engagement of every one of them. Doing a project where you don't involve the government, at the long run, you might experience some hiccups and some challenges. So you have to ensure each of these key stakeholders are properly engaged because they all have their role to play. They all have something they bring to the table. And then also we need good and sustainable financial models. We have a lot of financial models that have been implemented. We have pay as you go. We have guarantees where the government provide guarantees for energy projects. We also have grants, which some donor organizations are bringing to the table. So we need innovative financial mechanisms to ensure sustainable energy access. And another thing we also need is a risk-sharing mechanism. Every business comes with risk. Every activity, every project comes with risk. And the reason some key actors, draw back from implementing any project is when they analyze the risk and they are not willing to go ahead because of the risk. Now, for some projects, finance can be the risk. How do we now solve the challenge of finance? We can say, okay, the government can come in and share the risk with the investor. The government can bring a guarantee or a grant or whatever to share the risk, and that way the investor will be more willing to invest in that project or activity. So that's another aspect. And then we need the political climate, to be very stable for investors to come in to invest in renewable energy projects. They're all on the news. They're waiting to hear what's happening in Nigeria. For instance, during elections, you will see that a lot of investors held back. They are not willing. They always said, we want to know who the president is going to be. We want to know who the next governor is going to be before they come in. So the stable political climate is very, very essential for infrastructure development in energy assets and in energy assets. So all of these, have a role to play. Capacity building is also there. Farmers need to be trained on how to use innovative equipment, innovative finance, even innovative finance model, because you will find out that a lot of these farmers are not even aware of carbon finance, carbon credits. They are not aware. If they are aware, they cannot access these avenues. Even when they are aware, they don't have the technical know-how to access, this funding. So these are things that need to be put in place. The technical skills, the technical knowledge need to be available. We need to train people. We need to get the skills out there, the information out there, so that people can harness all of these and put all of these together. We need a complete ecosystem. We cannot leave one behind. Everyone, the government, the private sector, and the community, all three aspects have to be equally and vitally involved for any progress to be made in energy access.
That's leaving no one behind.
Exactly.
And talking about leaving no one behind, Ola, I know that you are the generation professional. You typically operate within the generation space, correct? Yeah. So what partnership structures between gas suppliers, power generators, and distribution utilities have proven most successful in ensuring reliable energy delivery? What have you seen?
Yeah, the most profitable partnership is that which enables respect for all the stakeholders. And what do I mean by respect? If I generate power, or if I take gas to be able to generate power, and I generate the power, transmit it, and distribute it, the user must respect the fact that I invested money in generating that power, and ensure that that forward flow in the supply chain also comes back in terms of the cash flow. So liquidity is the oxygen that the value chain needs to function. So any partnership that does not, or that strangles that liquidity, that oxygen, threatens the entire partnership. And we can see that, in our daily life, right? A situation where the generation companies are not able to even maintain or maintain business continuity because of liquidity. We have seen in the news lately how so many generating companies, including EGME, which is the largest generating company in Nigeria today, are crying because of debt. You have trillions of debt to generation companies in the value chain. As a result of that, anybody that is in that segment of the value chain would not want to generate more power if he has the opportunity to. The same thing happens, to the transmission guys and the distribution. So what would be my own recommendation? My recommendation would be more of private involvement, right? When we have a public-private partnership, we see more operational excellence, as Sophie said earlier, because the private guy that brings money, and, permit me to say, after TOE, not to mention the full name, invested in Ugeli Power, we saw how they were able to drive efficiency. The same thing when Sahara, bought over EGBI, FIP, and the likes. We see more operational excellence, more operational drive to ensure that whatever they have brought into that space, the investment is protected and the investment yields. So in a situation where the government sits on a critical section of the value chain, in a space as big as transmission, so being very direct, right? If we do not engage private partnership in the transmission system, we will continue to have these deliberations, over and over. I saw a 2020 or 2022 edition of the Electricity Hub, the Power Dialogue on YouTube. And one of the participants said the discussion they were having then in 2022, he had it in the 70s when he was a student. And unfortunately, we are still here. But if we are going to get serious about business, then we have to bring in people that are serious about business. We see what is happening in the refinery world after a private investor was able to prove that you can actually refine crude oil in Nigeria. We see that the government, refineries are also jumping and raising their, we can do it. So that's what happens. But when you leave it all to government, that transmission, because that's about the, broken link, right? The transmission, then you now talk about the consumers. The consumers must also be educated to understand that electricity is not a social service. Electricity is not a social service. I'm sorry to say that, I'm also a consumer, but I would rather pay more for electricity than run generator. Because one, I don't get to care about the noise.
It's cleaner.
Right? I don't get to care about maintenance. The generation guys, they know how to maintain and ensure continuous supply. So, in summary, a partnership structure that can work will be that which respects all the stakeholders. You have to respect the fact that the consumer has to respect the fact that the distribution guy is a business guy, so they have to pay. The distribution guy has to respect the fact that the generation guy is a business guy, so whatever money he recoups, he has to also remit back to the system. And the generation guy has to also respect the gas or the fuel supplier to say, okay, you are providing gas for me, I need to pay you. So that's the structure that I would recommend as a working structure.
Respect. I would come to the audience before I take our final thoughts. We have just a few minutes to go.
Yeah.
So the man in gray, I'll get to know your name in a few seconds.
Man in gray.
And then the person beside you. If there are other people who want to make contributions or have questions, please just indicate and then I'll come to you right after.
Thank you very much, Irene. I am Engineer Basil Ozulonye, and I'm a renewable energy expert. I'm currently working with Tractobel Otis joint venture, and I'm the lead solar battery expert at the Energizing Education project of the REA. There is, let me start with Engineer Ola. He said something which is a little bit contradictory with the project I'm on. Power is not a social service, but it can be. It can be a social intervention. When we make business all about profit making, then you will not be able to supply that business to the people that they call the underserved. They will always be underserved. Because the money wouldn't jump from anywhere and then come into their pockets and then they'll be able to pay. There's people who, because of the way economy is arranged, organized, it's going to be challenging for them to be able to pay for some of those vital services, those people in the last mile, All right. Having said that, earlier on in the conversation, you talked about the fact that solar power, for instance, has a high head cost. What do you think about a situation where instead of designing a solar power plant with a complementary battery energy storage system, it can be designed without the full complement of battery energy storage system? Because the batteries take 60% of the cost of the capex, the batteries alone. So if you have a rice community, like Beauty had mentioned the places where she had worked. We can have those farmers working in the daytime so they take advantage of the sun. I will tell you, since 2016, I bought an 11 kVA generator. For one day, I've not turned it on. 11 kVA generator, for one day, I never turned it on. And why? Because I've been using solar power for the past 8 years. Not one day in my house have I turned on the generator. And how is that possible? Of course, you know, because the solar power is a complete system. It can generate, it can save, and then you can consume that whenever you wish to. So I want Engineer Ola to speak to that because it can reduce capex. Let me come to Beauty. Some years back, by the way, I'm also a biogas engineer. Some years back, we had a multinational project in Lagos developing biogas plants. And I'm saying this because at some point you talked about generating power from biomass, the rice husks and all that. And you said that there's something you said that spoke to what I want to talk about now, which is waste characterization. When we started out that biogas project, more than 135,000, that is 140 KTA, that was the capacity of the plant, 140 kiloton per annum. We did not find data that told us about the sort of wastes in various localities, to what extent they are processed, to what extent they are available, and even the waste disposal system is not uniform. Only Lagos State, perhaps, and maybe one or two other states, have relatively developed waste disposal systems. So back to that problem of waste characterization. How do you suggest, by the way, is there any development on that? And how would you suggest that we go about waste characterization? Because without doing that, we can't have investors in biomass. Because they want to know in what states do I have 1,000 tons of waste so that I can convert that to energy. Without that, they're going to be walking blind. And just before I sit, let Madam Sophia, the electric vehicles. You know, we talk about these things as if it's really that easy. When we scale up, if you move it beyond Lagos and a few communities in Lagos, you will see the real problem is technical know-how. I will tell you that one of the reasons why we don't have a proliferation of electric vehicles or even hybrid vehicles, although now that we have gas, so we have hybrid vehicles because it's a combination of gas and fuel. But we don't have a proliferation of hybrid vehicles, and that's because the technical capacity to maintain broken down or broken down vehicles is not easily available. Even the normal fuel cars, only 1 in 1,000 mechanics will get it right, that you will not go back to them again. So can you speak to the problem of technical know-how in the adoption of electric vehicles? Thank you. So I literally asked you all 3 questions.
I mean, just to sort of, Sophia, in case we have mechanical engineers that can also support in that response, that would be very helpful. I think we should also just take the final question. Do we have any other questions in the room? Gone.
Right. All right. Good evening. Of course, thank you, Power Dialogue, Electricity Hub. It's quite impressive every time I come here. The panelists are fantastic. The audience are great. I mean, see my brother here, an engineer with different caps. So I would summarize my question is towards Mr. Ola. It's rather technical, but I'd like you to simplify it a bit for my sake and for everyone in the audience. So in the case of Nigeria, we know we have a problem with transmission. We have a maximum capacity we can carry, and you have highlighted that in many instances. Can you explain, being an engineer on the gas side, why we have gas power plants coming in with, say, 1,000 megawatts, 900 megawatts, 500 megawatts into the country when we do realize this capacity cannot be taken? 1. 2, what is the economics of it? If I'm giving you a 1,000 megawatt power plant, combined cycle gas power plant, is the federal government giving me any guarantees? Are these guarantees for all power plants, or are some excluded? Furthermore, So let's say.
Please make it very short. We're
Okay,
out
okay,
of time.
okay, sure. So what exactly is being paid for? If I have 1,000 megawatts and I'm firing my gas power plant for just 250 megawatts, who pays for the remaining 750? In my investment case, when I'm making a PPA, what are the arrangements for? I think these are questions that people need to understand to have a flavor of where exactly the problems lie on the generation side. I mean, but of course, we'll chit-chat after this. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you for also mentioning that you chit-chat, because I'm giving everybody just 50 seconds Hall of Fame now. Please just respond very quickly to all the questions. I don't know how you're going to do it. Energy as an intervention. Ola, please.
Yes.
That 50 seconds is plus his question. So.
Okay. So I'll try to. So 50 seconds. Yes. So I want to summarize, Engineer Basil, that if we are able to, if the people that can afford electricity are able to pay a cost-reflective tariff for electricity, it will make it easier to get to the last mile, where electricity will now become a social service to the underserved. And I say that because it's a model that the even global electricity system framework is built on. There's a book I will encourage you to read. It's called The Grid, right, by Bakke, B-A-K-K-E. And it talks about the development of the grid of the US. And one of the chapters focused on how the economics of power developed. So it was believed that, power should only be used by the industrial sector. But over time, it was observed that if I set up a power plant just so that I can supply to a factory, at night when the factory is down, what do I do with the power? And it means that the industry will have to pay more. So that led to the development of appliances, where people now say, okay, how can we make people consume more electricity? Because the more people consume and they pay, the cost drops. In Nigeria today, right, many people that steal power, many people that, shunt electricity are people that even have the means. So if you have the means and you are shunting, that means you are depriving those that don't even have the means that should enjoy power as a social service from getting it. We can deliberate on that later. But to answer his own question around the why do we have more investment or more development of power plant when we are not able to transmit the power? Many of the power plants that we see today have been in the pipeline for a long time. So that's why you see, maybe because the capital discussion went so long and they're able, and it delayed it. But if you see one of the latest power plant, which is the Azura Power, they were able to solve for that, to say, guy, you need to give me a sovereign guarantee such that if I am available to supply you 600 megawatts, and because of your transmission line, you are not able to collect the 600, you have to pay me. So that's where the economics comes in, to say, if I'm setting up a power plant and I want to negotiate a PPA, I must put into consideration the social, the local challenges, because you can definitely set up a power plant and not be able to evacuate your power. If you are not covered by your PPA, nobody will listen to you. But with a strong PPA, as we have in Azura, which we are not likely to have in till another generation, we will still be where we are today.
Thank
until
you
we
very
fix the
much,
transmission.
Ola.
Thank you.
To be continued after the session. Yes, and would go to Beauty. You had a question about waste characterization.
Yeah.
Very quickly, please.
Okay, as an agribusiness strategist, I would want to take it that is an oversight on your part, that you are investing and you didn't do a visibility study. Because if you are into industrialization, you should know that supply chain is the backbone of your company, right? But I don't know if there's any updated data about waste characterization. But I would say that you can find people that have interest in the data and partner with and do a field study and get the data. Data is very, very essential in decision making. That's just it.
Thank you very much. And finally to Sophia, technical capacity to fix electric vehicles. Everybody can relate.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very quickly. Thank
Okay,
you.
for technical capacity for EVs is a new sector. And of course, I know a lot of people did not go to school to study that. So it's actually a sector that needs intervention, capacity building, skill acquisition, where various arms in the society can take it up. Public institutions can take it up. The government can provide skill acquisition programs where people, it's a whole value chain. You have the manufacturing aspect of it, you have the maintenance, you have the sales, the distribution aspect of it. So it's a whole value chain and it requires collaboration on all aspects. So that's it for, yeah.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for indulging us and to all the participants that joined us this evening. I would like us to just end with one word to sort of cap everything you have each said as an intervention. I'll start with you from the far left, right, left. Yes, Beauty.
Okay, I think I'll just read on what I had said before, which also validates most of the points that Mr. Ola has made. So I would say that there should be a stakeholder forum where you have these investors that want to invest in alternative energy sources, and the government and the energy experts and the agri experts, and they're able to discuss on a policy that is centered on how to finance alternative sort of energy.
Thank you.
There and then, the government is able to understand at what point they can subsidize. And the investor is able to say, okay, we can finance up to this. Not for them to just form a policy, and at the end of the day, the investors is not favorable for them, and they just stand aside.
Thank you very much. That speaks to the respect across value chains Ola spoke about. Ola, quickly.
All right, I would say that energy is the oxygen that every society needs, and every stakeholder, government, consumers, investors, must ensure that they prioritize the access to energy by the critical sectors. So it is not ideal for a country like Nigeria, where we really want to develop, we need development, to consume 60% of the electricity we generate in residential sector only. We need to increase the access to electricity for the commercial and the industrial. And we all need to also be energy smart and energy disciplined, because one of the challenges we have as a nation is that we are not in the right way, efficient in our utilization of electricity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Sophie, finally.
Okay, final words. I'll talk about action. It's good to dialogue, it's good to talk about it, but what's the action you and I we're going to take after here? We have representatives from the private sector, business owners are here, we have people in the government, we have consumers here. So what's your role? What's your action after this meeting? And that's the fruits of our discussion. So it's for us to take action to enable us, achieve our energy access goals as a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for tonight. I'm just going to wrap up with 3 points because I have my notes all filled up, just so that we don't sit here another 30 minutes. Energy needs assessment before you go into any community to provide them service. Then to clusterization, burden of cost and capital is spread over multiple stakeholders, then the cost begins to make sense. And then putting infrastructure to bring in IGR and PPP is something that we cannot neglect. Thank you so much to everyone, all my panelists here who have contributed to this conversation. And before we leave, I would say that you should please, if you have not followed the Electricity Hub across all our social media platforms, please do well to do that. That's the name across social media platforms: Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube as well. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good evening. I'll hand over to Omona. Okay. Thank you. I think we'll take a picture. Are we taking a picture?
Well done, beauty.
Are we taking a picture?
Great job. Sophie.
Everyone, let's give a round of applause to our panelists, please.
Okay, so I think we're
All right, thank you to you, our audience, for participating in this
picture.
dialogue. Every one of you will agree with me that this has been an interesting dialogue, and we hope you join us in the next dialogue, which is the 101st dialogue. So please, we have the refreshment at the back. Do well to collect your pack when going, and also do well to network, because there are so many people here that you can meet, and you can decide, you can make a decision, there are business ideas you can come up together. So please network and do have a great day and good night. Thank you.